What if your very presence stirs something in others, something they cannot explain, something they can't even name? What if the discomfort people project onto you has nothing to do with your words or actions, but with your aura? Carl Jung might say that empaths do not simply feel deeply, they emit a rare energetic frequency that resonates far beyond emotion. This rare aura is not visible to the eye, but it is unmistakably felt. It is a quiet force that soothes the wounded, magnetizes the lost, and sometimes repels those not yet ready to face their own reflection. To carry such a presence is a paradox. On one hand, it brings warmth and healing to those who are open. On the other hand, it silently exposes what is unhealed in others, triggering discomfort, envy, or even attack. And for the empath, this can feel like both a gift and a burden. But here is the turning point. Your aura is not your curse, it is your instrument. Without awareness, it becomes a sponge for unresolved energies, draining your spirit and eroding your boundaries. With conscious awareness, however, it transforms into a finely tuned field, capable of healing without self-sacrifice, sensing without absorption, and connecting without collapse. This is the paradox of the rare aura. It does not need to shrink to protect itself. It needs to awaken. So the deeper question becomes this: are you the unconscious empath who bleeds, or the conscious one who radiates? This video explores the Jungian map of what it means to carry this rare energetic signature, and how to master it rather than being mastered by it. What if the very sensitivity you once judged as weakness was actually born out of necessity, forged in the fire of survival? Many empaths discover, often much later in life, that their deepest gift first appeared in moments of chaos. As children, they did not simply learn kindness, they learned vigilance. They trained their nervous systems to read the smallest shifts in tone, the slightest changes in mood, the invisible tremors of tension in a room. This was not a choice. It was the only way to feel safe. Imagine a child growing up with a volatile parent whose emotions swung unpredictably between affection and rage. The child learns to watch closely, to anticipate the storm before it breaks, to silence their own needs so they do not add fuel to the fire. Another child, raised in an environment of emotional neglect, becomes hyper-attuned not to what is said, but to what is missing, longing to fill the void by becoming indispensable to others. These patterns are not signs of empathy as a virtue at first. They are signs of adaptation, of survival strategies woven into the body and soul. Carl Jung referred to this as premature ego adaptation, the psyche bending itself too soon, forcing the self to shape around the instability of others. The cost is heavy. The child becomes an expert in external worlds, but a stranger to their inner one. Their nervous system remains on high alert long after the danger has passed, scanning every environment for subtle cues. Science now supports Jung's insight. Research on highly sensitive people shows amplified sensory processing and heightened mirror neuron activity, meaning these individuals are wired to feel more, to sense more, to take in the unseen. This survival-born sensitivity becomes, over time, a kind of emotional antenna. Empaths do not simply hear words, they feel the vibration beneath them. They do not just notice faces, they register the fatigue in the eyes, the tightness of the jaw, the unspoken sorrow in a forced smile. But here lies the paradox. What once saved them now threatens to overwhelm them. Without awareness, the antenna pulls in every frequency, leaving the empath flooded and drained. Yet within this wound lies a hidden gift. The very system that was shaped in chaos can become, with awareness, a refined instrument of clarity and connection. Jung reminds us that what is unconscious controls us, but what becomes conscious can liberate us. The question is not whether you are too sensitive. The deeper question is whether you will remain enslaved by the survival pattern or awaken to its true potential. So pause and ask yourself, was your empathy truly a gift from the start, or was it a shield you forged in childhood chaos? And if it began as a shield, could it now become your compass? Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt something unspoken, grief, tension, or even joy, without anyone saying a word? What if your body already knew the emotional history of a space before your mind caught up? This is not magic. It is energetic archaeology. And for the empath, it is happening all the time, whether they realize it or not. Most empaths think they are simply feeling people's emotions, but that barely scratches the surface. What they are truly doing is running a silent, unconscious three-part process. First, they scan for what Jung called feeling-toned complexes, psychological wounds in others that still carry emotional charge. These might not even be visible, but the empath's finely tuned nervous system picks up on shifts, pauses, and energetic weight, like sonar bouncing off an unseen reef. Second, they slip into a state Jung described as participation mystique, a temporary dissolution of self-other boundaries. Here, the empath unconsciously merges with the person or space they are reading, losing their center in the process. And third, they begin alchemizing, transforming that absorbed emotional material through the transcendent function, which Jung defined as the symbolic process of integrating opposites to reach new psychological wholeness. But when this cycle remains unconscious, it becomes a prison instead of a gift. The empath turns into an emotional sponge, soaking up pain, shame, or confusion without knowing why their energy collapses after every interaction. They might walk away from a conversation feeling heavy, foggy, or responsible for someone else's sorrow. Over time, this leads to compassion, fatigue, emotional burnout, and in severe cases, psychosomatic illness. This is why so many empaths report feeling exhausted after family gatherings, certain workplaces, or even scrolling through social media. They are absorbing unprocessed shadow material without knowing it. They are not broken, they are overloaded, and the more unconscious the process, the more blurred the boundary becomes between healing and harm. Carl Jung believed the true path of the empath is not to shut down or withdraw, but to consciously participate in this alchemical process. That means learning to observe without merging, to witness without drowning, and to feel without fragmenting. When this inner shift begins, the empath is no longer a sponge, but a skilled archaeologist, one who gently brushes away the dust of emotional debris to reveal buried truths, both in themselves and in others. So here is the question. Are you unknowingly carrying emotional artifacts that were never yours to begin with? And if so, what would it mean to return them and reclaim your own field as sacred? Why do some people instantly feel like home, while others slowly drain the life out of you? The answer may not be found in their words or actions, but in the silent language of your energy field. You see, the empath's aura is not just a reflection of sensitivity. It is a magnet, and like all magnets, it attracts both the gold and the debris. It draws in what mirrors your healing and what matches your unresolved wounds. The question is no longer, why are they like this? But, what inside me is inviting this pattern again? Imagine a woman who keeps falling for men who open up to her like broken children. She holds their pain, becomes their sanctuary, only to be discarded when they begin to heal or resist changing. On the surface, she's loving, but underneath, her aura is broadcasting something deeper, a wounded healer archetype trying to redeem herself by fixing what cannot be saved. The result is spiritual depletion, a bleeding of psychic energy. The same story, different faces. Carl Jung warned of this, the danger of archetypal confusion. When your unconscious wound identifies with another's, you don't see them. You see the echo of your own shadow. You project healing onto the one who is not ready. You confuse emotional intensity for depth. You mistake familiar dysfunction for fate. In doing so, you feed a loop that only ends when you awaken to your own participation in the story. The empathic aura does not lie. It calls in exactly what you are emotionally available for, even if your mind resists it. It pulls in the wounded child when you haven't yet rescued your own. It attracts the shadow projector when you still hide your anger behind kindness. It summons the energy vampire when you confuse love with sacrifice, but it also magnetizes the conscious seeker once you yourself become one. This is not punishment, it is energetic precision. Healing begins the moment you recognize that your aura is not a passive filter, but an active transmitter. When you take back authorship of the patterns you attract, you step out of victimhood and into individuation. Your energy no longer seeks to complete its story through others. It becomes whole unto itself. Only then do your attraction patterns shift from those who drain to those who mirror your clarity, from those who need saving to those who respect your light. So the real question is, what is your aura still grieving? And what would happen if you let it stop bleeding and start creating? Have you ever walked into a room and felt tension rise without saying a word? Or noticed how some people open their hearts in your presence, while others seem to bristle, shrink, or even attack? This silent emotional reaction often has nothing to do with what you've done, and everything to do with what your energy reflects. When your aura becomes integrated through self-awareness and shadow work, it stops absorbing and starts mirroring. It becomes a living psychological mirror, showing others the parts of themselves they are either longing to meet or desperate to avoid. This phenomenon plays out most painfully in close relationships. A woman begins her healing journey, reclaims her voice, and suddenly her longtime partner starts picking fights or accusing her of changing. A man finally sets a boundary with his family, and they label him cold or selfish. These are not random reactions. They are emotional defense mechanisms triggered by the discomfort of being seen too clearly. Jung warned that what is unconscious in ourselves appears in our relationships as fate. In this case, your very presence stirs the unconscious material in others, either drawing them closer or pushing them into resistance. To the conscious individual, your presence feels safe, grounding, even sacred. They see your boundaries as clarity. Your depth evokes trust. Your silence invites self-reflection. But to someone fragmented by their own inner war, your energetic coherence feels like a threat. It presses against their unresolved guilt, unspoken envy, or denied vulnerability. You did not cause their discomfort. Your aura simply amplified what was already there. This is why healing empaths often find themselves increasingly misunderstood. As they shed their people-pleasing patterns and reclaim their energetic integrity, they stop playing the roles others assigned to them. They are no longer the emotional sponge, the fixer, the compliant vessel. They are now a clear mirror, and clarity, when met by unconsciousness, can feel like judgment. Not because you are judging, but because others are not ready to face what they see in your reflection. Here lies the emotional paradox. The more healed you become, the more clearly you will be both loved and rejected. This is not a flaw in your aura. It is a sign that your presence is working as it should. You are no longer blending in to survive. You are vibrating in truth, and truth polarizes. Carl Jung called this energetic reaction the encounter with the shadow, the part of the psyche that holds everything we disown. When your presence evokes someone's shadow, they will either take responsibility and grow, or project blame onto you. This is why your boundaries become sacred, not to punish others, but to protect your light from distortion. Your inner peace is not up for negotiation. Your clarity is not a burden to dim. You do not owe your softness to someone else's avoidance of their own pain. So ask yourself, are you dimming your light just to be more palatable? Or are you willing to be the mirror that reflects truth, even if it shakes the room? Have you ever wondered why people seem to cry in your presence, even when you say nothing at all? Why do strangers confess their life stories after 5 minutes with you? Or why does a room shift when you enter it, like a tuning fork sounding silently beneath the noise? This is not a coincidence. It is the invisible architecture of an empath's gift operating at a collective level. When an empath has integrated their own pain and reclaimed their energetic sovereignty, they begin to act not just as a mirror, but as a living bridge between unconscious emotion and conscious healing. In Jungian psychology, this is no longer the wound acting. This is the archetype of the wounded healer transfigured. When an empath becomes conscious of their inner work and no longer bleeds for others, they radiate a stable frequency of presence. That presence, without force or persuasion, becomes a subtle doorway through which others remember their own buried truths. They don't always know why they feel lighter or safer near you, but what they sense is coherence. What they feel is something unspoken yet undeniable, a quiet invitation to meet themselves. But here lies the paradox. Many empaths mistake this capacity as a calling to rescue. They unconsciously absorb the suffering of others and pour themselves out, believing they are the only ones who can save them. Jung warns fiercely against this savior complex. When the empath overfunctions emotionally, they deny others the dignity of their own awakening. Instead of helping them rise, they become a crutch. Instead of modeling sovereignty, they invite dependence. And in doing so, the empath burns out, not because they loved too much, but because they loved without boundaries. Healing, in its truest sense, is not about carrying others. It is about embodying the path so clearly that others find their own footing. Just like a lantern does not walk for the traveler, it simply shines. And so the empath's greatest gift is not emotional labor, but energetic clarity. The light does not chase the wounded. It simply glows where it stands. The empowered empath does not reach into the abyss to pull someone out. They sit at the edge of their own integration and allow the lost to come closer if they choose. In this role, the empath becomes a collective activator. They no longer attract only those who want to feed on their light, but those who are ready to light their own. The soul recognizers, the seekers, the ones who, like the empath once did, are weary of their false self and hungry for what is real. And in those quiet moments of connection, not through performance, not through fixing, but through presence, the field of collective consciousness subtly rises. So the question is not, how can I heal everyone I meet, but rather, am I living in such integrity with my own soul that I remind others of theirs? What if your presence was not a tool for sacrifice, but a frequency of truth? What if the path to helping others was not through effort, but through embodiment? Let that question rest in your body. And watch who you attract when your light no longer flickers to please, but glows to simply exist. What if your deepest wound wasn't meant to destroy you, but to initiate you into sovereignty? It often begins in silence. Not the silence of peace, but the aching quiet after yet another moment of emotional collapse. When you gave too much, lost yourself again, and were left trying to gather the scattered pieces of your being. You begin to realize that your sensitivity is not the problem. It's the absence of structure around it, the absence of conscious practices that allow your inner light to stay lit even when others arrive with storms. Many empaths reach this turning point not through enlightenment, but through exhaustion. After years of energetic overextension and psychic depletion, the soul whispers a final plea: "Please, let us come home." And this is the invitation, an alchemical shift from wounded healer to sovereign empath. Carl Jung understood this as the individuation process, where one reclaims what was lost to survival and transforms it into sacred power. The path to sovereignty does not require the empath to give up their gift, but to restructure it from within, grounding their energy in self-reflection, ritual, and inner alignment. Instead of unconsciously absorbing everything around them, sovereign empaths learn to hold presence like a lighthouse, not drowning in others' storms, but illuminating safe shores through their very being. One woman I worked with, after decades of emotional burnout in her career as a hospice nurse, finally began walking alone in the forest each morning. Not to escape, but to remember. She would place her hands on the bark of old trees and whisper all she carried. In those moments, nature became her therapist, and over time, what once felt like pain started to hum with sacred meaning. She reconnected with painting, letting her intuition guide the brush. She didn't just process emotion, she transfigured it. As her inner practices deepened, her outer world changed. The same people who once drained her slowly fell away. And in their place arrived those who were self-aware, who honored her presence, who asked instead of took. This is not magic. It is the practical unfolding of Jung's transcendent function, a psychic process that integrates opposing forces without splitting the soul. To practice conscious empathy means to feel with others while staying rooted in one's own emotional center. It is to witness pain without becoming it, and in doing so, your aura becomes not a sponge, but a tuning fork for truth. You no longer attract emotional chaos because your field no longer resonates with it. You become an embodied healing field, not by rescuing others, but by living your own integration so fully that it offers silent permission for others to do the same. So where can you begin? Sometimes it is as simple as silence, a daily ritual, a return to what used to bring you joy before the world asked you to abandon it. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For the empath, this means no longer outsourcing your worth to how well you heal others, but reclaiming your birthright to feel with the world, not for it. What if your energy was never meant to be scattered, but sacredly contained? What practices are calling you home now, not to fix anyone else, but to finally belong to yourself? What does it truly mean to remain whole in a world that pulls you to pieces? There comes a moment in every empath's life when the story changes, not because the world suddenly becomes softer, but because the soul becomes stronger. You stop viewing your sensitivity as a liability and begin to see it as the sacred thread that connects you to the deeper pulse of life. No longer torn between feeling everything and losing yourself, you begin to realize that mastery is not the suppression of your sensitivity, but the conscious stewardship of it. Carl Jung believed that true maturity is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to carry emotion with clarity, courage, and care. To feel the currents of the collective unconscious, yet not drown in them. To witness suffering and love deeper, not less. The empath, when integrated, becomes the embodiment of this principle. Their journey is not one of avoidance or numbing, but of profound alchemy, turning raw sensitivity into intuitive wisdom and old wounds into wellsprings of insight. You are no longer a vessel that others pour their chaos into. You become the keeper of your own flame, knowing when to open, when to close, and when to simply be. You create energetic thresholds that protect the sacred temple of your nervous system, and through that containment, your presence becomes even more powerful, not because you give more, but because what you are now radiates through everything you do. Real-life examples of this transformation are not rare. They often show up quietly in the lives of those who have walked through fire and chosen not to harden, but to refine. A man who once feared his emotional intensity now teaches veterans how to process grief through meditation and movement. A woman who once lost herself in caregiving now holds space for others without losing her center, her art, or her joy. These individuals are not trying to fix anyone anymore. They are simply embodying a frequency of wholeness that others can feel, and that feeling awakens something ancient and true in those around them, the knowing that healing is possible. This is the empath's true contribution to the world, not martyrdom, not emotional labor, not boundaryless love, but the silent transmission of integration, the ability to stand in a room, feel everything, and still choose peace, to no longer fear your depth, but to dwell in it as a sovereign being. This kind of presence changes dynamics, softens conflict, and plants seeds of transformation just by existing. Jung would call this the archetype of the wounded healer, no longer defined by their pain, but transformed by it. The world needs more of this, not more doing, but more being. And so, you must ask yourself, what if the final phase of your journey is not about becoming less sensitive, but more sovereign? What if your very wholeness is the medicine you were born to bring? Because in the end, the most powerful thing an empath can do is not absorb the world's suffering, but remain intact in its presence. To walk through it, illuminated, not consumed. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.